All right, so we're going to dive into something that's been on my mind a lot lately.
Okay.
Brain health. And we're doing a deep dive into this incredible interview with Dr. Daniel Amen on the Rich Roll podcast.
I love Rich Roll.
And you guys know how much I love Rich Roll.
Yeah.
But this interview really just got me thinking a little differently about my own brain.
You know, it's so funny because he talks about this idea of brain envy.
Yeah.
Like, instead of envying someone's car or their house,
Right.
it should be like, man, I wish I had their brain.
I know.
You know?
Right.
It sounds funny, but then you start to think about it and you're like,
Yeah.
that actually makes
It makes a lot of sense.
a lot of sense.
It really does.
Like, what if we valued having a really healthy brain as
Yeah.
much as we valued having, you know, a successful career or a big bank account?
Totally.
Like, he's really arguing that brain health is this achievement
Yeah.
that we actively cultivate throughout our lives.
Absolutely. And he's not just talking about it. He's like living it.
Right.
You know, like he actually scanned his own brain and was surprised by what he saw.
Yeah. He tells this funny story about how,
Oh, no.
you know, he had his brain scanned and he was like, as a psychiatrist, my brain should look amazing.
Right.
And it did not look as good as his mother's,
Oh, really?
who was in her 60s.
Wow.
And her brain scan blew his out of the water.
That's amazing.
I know, isn't that funny?
I love that.
I just love that story.
Yeah.
But here's where I think he gets really hopeful, is that he is such a huge advocate for
Wow.
what's called neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
basically it means our brains aren't fixed.
Right.
They can change and adapt throughout our lives. And he uses this really amazing story about his nephew, Andrew, to kind of illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah. What happened with Andrew?
So Andrew was 9 years old,
Okay.
and he started exhibiting some like really concerning behaviors,
Oh.
aggression withdrawal. He was even drawing these really disturbing pictures.
Wow.
And naturally, his parents were
Yeah.
freaking out a little bit.
Of course.
So they bring him to Dr. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, you know, years after he'd started looking at brains in his practice.
Yeah.
And he suspected that there might be some neurological component to this
Right.
and recommended a brain scan. And it turned out that Andrew had this large cyst pressing on his left temporal lobe.
Wow. And for those of us who aren't neuroscientists, the left temporal lobe is involved.
Yeah, that's a key area for processing emotions
Okay.
and language.
Makes sense.
So it kind of tracks, right,
Yeah, totally.
with what he was going through.
So what happened?
So here's the kicker.
Okay.
The other neurologists that Dr. Amen consulted with were hesitant to remove it
What?
because they said that Andrew wasn't displaying what they considered to be severe enough symptoms
Oh, my God.
to warrant brain surgery.
That's terrifying.
Can you imagine? But Dr. Amen pushed for the surgery.
Ugh.
And the change in Andrew was remarkable,
Wow.
like almost immediately. After the surgery, he transformed from being this withdrawn, angry child to like smiling,
Oh, my goodness.
engaging with his family.
That's amazing.
The surgery literally changed his life.
It makes you think about how we're approaching these issues in general.
Yeah.
Like, is it just me, or do we tend to oversimplify things when it comes to mental health? Like,
Yeah.
we think, oh, you know, just talk about it, you'll be fine.
And he really pushes back against that
Right.
oversimplification.
Yeah.
He's not saying that therapy is useless,
Right.
but he believes that it's often most effective
Okay.
when it's paired with lifestyle changes
Yeah.
and, if necessary, medication.
Right.
It's about recognizing that each brain is unique.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like expecting a one-size-fits-all approach to work
Exactly.
when our brains are as individual as our fingerprints.
Right. And this is where I think his Bright Minds approach is so helpful.
Yeah, let's break that down a little.
Okay. Bright Minds is an acronym.
Okay.
That stands for the 11
Okay.
major risk factors that can impact brain health.
Got it. Got it. Okay. What are we talking about?
So we've got B for blood flow,
Okay.
which is, you know, crucial for delivering oxygen and nutrients to the brain.
Makes sense.
R is for retirement or aging,
Right.
because our brains change as we get older.
Of course.
Is for inflammation,
Yeah.
which we hear a lot about these days.
Right.
But he believes it plays a huge role in brain health.
Okay, so that's BRI. What about the rest of the acronym?
Okay, so G is for genetics.
Okay.
H is for head trauma.
Mm-hmm.
T is for toxins.
Okay.
And this one's a big one.
Okay.
Think about all the chemicals we're exposed to every single day.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Cleaning products,
Oh, yeah.
makeup, even scented candles.
Oh, wow.
All of these things contain toxins that can impact our brain function.
It's a little overwhelming when you start to think about it.
It can be.
Yeah.
But that's why knowledge is power.
Right.
And then we have M for mental health.
Right.
Because, of course, pre-existing conditions matter.
Of course.
Is for immunity and infections.
Okay.
Because turns out those can really do a number on your brain.
Yeah, they can.
N is for neurohormones.
Okay.
Things like thyroid hormones, estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things can affect our mood and our cognition.
So it's not just in your head, so to speak.
Exactly.
Right, like there's real biology at play.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then we have D for digestive health.
Okay.
What you eat really does affect your brain.
Right.
And finally, S for sleep.
Of course.
He's a huge proponent of prioritizing good sleep for optimal brain function.
And you know what this whole Bright Minds thing is making me think about?
What's that?
This whole idea of mental health.
Okay.
And how we label things.
Yeah.
Because, he shares this story about a patient named Adriana who was misdiagnosed with schizophrenia. Oh, wow.
But it turned out her symptoms were actually caused by a severe vitamin B12 deficiency.
Really?
It just highlights how interconnected our physical and mental well-being really are.
That's a great example. And he is very passionate about this idea of looking at the whole picture.
Right.
Instead of just slapping a label on someone.
Yes.
He says that, labeling someone with a lifelong mental illness without exploring potential biological factors is, and I'm quoting him here, insane.
Wow.
It's a powerful statement.
Yeah, it is. It really challenges us to think differently about how we approach these issues.
Totally.
Right? Instead of just focusing on symptoms, we should be looking deeper
100%.
at the root causes, what's really going on.
Yeah. And that includes factors that we might not immediately think of, like our environment, our relationships.
Right.
Even our thought patterns.
It's so easy to get stuck in those negative thought patterns.
Especially if we've experienced trauma or difficult times.
Of course.
But he would argue that, even past trauma doesn't have to define us.
Right. He's a firm believer in the power of therapy.
Yes.
Especially approaches like EMDR and ISTDP.
And just to clarify for our listeners, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes.
And ISTDP stands for intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy.
Right.
These are both therapeutic approaches that have been shown to be really helpful in processing and integrating traumatic experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the key here is that he's not saying that therapy alone is the magic bullet.
Right.
It's one important tool.
Okay.
In conjunction with these lifestyle changes, addressing the biological factors.
Right.
And nurturing a healthy mindset.
He talks a lot about, creating the optimal conditions for our brains to thrive.
Yes. And I love that.
Right.
Because it really is about taking care of ourselves.
Yes.
On all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally.
100%.
It's all connected.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's where I think things get really interesting, especially for parents.
Yeah.
I was really struck by his thoughts on raising kids with strong brains.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how it's not just about
Right.
academic achievement or even traditional markers of success,
Totally.
but it's about equipping them with the tools to navigate life's inevitable challenges.
He stresses the importance of building resilience,
Yeah.
problem-solving skills,
Yes.
a strong sense of self-worth.
Right, because you can't protect them from everything.
You can't.
Right, and he actually argues that trying to shield kids from every hardship can actually backfire.
Totally.
Because it prevents them from developing the resilience they need to actually thrive
100%.
in the real world.
That's right. And it doesn't mean that we abandon them.
Right.
You know.
Of course not.
But it's about finding that sweet spot
Yes.
between support and allowing for healthy struggle.
I love that you bring up resilience because I feel like that's something we could all use a little bit more of.
Totally.
Kids and adults alike. And this is where I thought his advice on managing technology was so interesting.
Oh, gosh, it's such a relevant topic.
I know, right?
Especially in today's world.
Right.
Where technology is just so ingrained in our lives.
Yeah.
You know? And he doesn't shy away from the potential downsides.
Right.
Particularly for developing brains.
Yeah. He seems especially concerned about the addictive nature of social media and video games.
Yes.
And I think he even compares them to DOS machines.
He does.
Because they're designed to trigger those dopamine releases that keep us coming back for more.
Right. And he was explaining how that constant stimulation can actually numb our pleasure centers over time.
Wow.
And potentially lead to, issues like anxiety, depression, even addiction.
It's like we're constantly chasing that next dopamine hit. But the satisfaction is so fleeting.
Exactly. And it's not even just the content itself.
Right.
It's the sheer amount of time
that
many of us are spending on devices.
Oh, totally.
Kids and adults alike.
Right.
And how that can interfere with sleep, with our relationships, even just our ability to focus and engage in the real world.
He makes a really good point about setting those boundaries.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to sleep.
He talks about, creating these screen-free zones.
Yeah.
Especially the bedroom.
Right.
To protect sleep quality.
Okay, I'll admit I'm guilty of scrolling through my phone in bed.
Yeah.
But what about the argument that, some people use technology to unwind before sleep?
So he addresses that directly.
Okay.
He says that, while it might feel relaxing in the moment, the blue light emitted from our devices actually interferes with melatonin production.
Okay.
Which is what regulates our sleep-wake cycle.
So even if we're falling asleep easily with our phones,
right,
the quality of that sleep might be
compromised.
Exactly. And then that has ripple effects on our energy levels, our mood, our cognitive function, you name it.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. And I love that he suggests this digital sunset.
What is that?
Putting away devices at least an hour before bed.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's a nice visual.
It is. It is. And it's so interesting how this all connects back to brain health,
Right.
It's not just about what we're feeding our brains, information-wise,
totally,
but also how we're treating them on a physical level.
100%.
Right.
And it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff.
Right.
He provides a ton of practical strategies for actively nourishing our brains.
Like what?
One that really stood out to me was his morning affirmation.
Okay.
Today's going to be a great day.
I've heard of morning affirmations.
Yeah.
But do those actually work?
So he explains that, by setting that positive intention first thing in the morning, we're essentially priming our brains.
Yeah. To look for the good.
So it's about shifting our perspective.
Exactly.
Right. And focusing on the positive.
Exactly. And he doesn't just stop there.
Okay.
He also suggests pairing that morning affirmation with an evening reflection.
What does that look like?
So it's like a gratitude practice.
Okay.
But on a deeper level.
Okay.
He suggests reviewing your day hour by hour.
Wow.
And looking for even just those small moments of joy or connection.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
I like that.
I know.
No, I could see how that would really help, rewire our brains to focus on the good.
Right.
Even on those days where it's tough to find the good.
And what I think is so inspiring about his approach is that it's not about being perfect.
Of course not.
He acknowledges that life throws curveballs. We're all going to experience setbacks.
Right.
But he encourages us to approach those challenges with a growth mindset.
And he seems to really practice what he preaches.
He does.
Because he talks about using these same tools.
Yes.
Like that evening reflection to navigate, challenging times in his own life.
Right. He's very open about his own struggles.
Yes.
And how he's used these principles to cultivate greater resilience and well-being.
And that kind of brings us back to, I think, his most powerful question from this whole interview.
Yes.
Which is, do I love it and does it love me back?
Yes.
And we've talked about that throughout the episode a little bit, but I'm curious, how do you personally apply that to your own life?
I think for me, it's become kind of a litmus test.
Okay.
For my choices.
Okay.
Whether it's food, relationships, work projects, even how I spend my free time.
Right.
I ask myself, do I love this? And does it contribute to my well-being?
I love that.
And if the answer is no, then it's time to reevaluate.
It's about being intentional with our choices.
100%.
And recognizing the impact that they have on our overall well-being.
Exactly.
This was fantastic.
It was so good.
I feel like I learned so much.
Me too.
I'm definitely going to be thinking a lot about brain envy from now on.
I know, me too.
And all the bright minds.
Yeah.
But, I think what I really want our listeners to take away from this is just how much power we actually have over our brains and therefore over our lives.
Right.
It's never too late to start making those changes that support a healthier and happier brain.
100%.
Well, this was amazing.
So fun.
I always love chatting with you.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yes.
We'll catch you next time.